And hello, everybody. Welcome back for another episode, if not now, when. Today, oh my goodness, I have such an honor to introduce today's special guest. We have Steve Hoffman here in the show with us, or AKA Captain Hoff. Let me tell you a little bit more about Steve. Steve is the CEO of Founder Space, one of the world's leading startup accelerator with over 50 partners over 22 countries. Oh my goodness. And if you don't know Founder Space it was founded with a mission to educate and accelerate entrepreneurs. Founder Space has become one of the top startup accelerators in the world. Wow. And Captain Hoff have trained hundreds of startups and corporate executives in the arts of innovation and providing consulting to many world's largest corporations. Founderspace was ranked #1 incubator for overseas startup by Forbes and Entrepreneur magazine. Hoffman is also venture investors, founder of 3 venture-backed and 2 bootstrap startups. Last but not the least, he has so much more time, of course. He also is the author of several award-winning books, those including Making Elephant Fly. Wow, I would love to know how. Surviving a Startup, The 5 Forces. With that, everybody, oh my God, with all my honor, full of my heart, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Wen. It is fantastic to be here.
Amazing. So with that, tell us, how's all magic get started, Captain Hoff?
So it got started by accident. So I had done 3 venture funded startups, 2 bootstrap startups, and I was taking a break from doing startups when all my friends started to come to me and they said my nickname. They're like, Captain Hoff, can you help me? How do I raise money? How do I put together a business plan? What do I do next? So I would go out to coffee with them. I would help them. And then they all had similar questions. So I started to post the answers, my advice on my blog, which is called Founders Space. And it just started to grow. A lot of entrepreneurs started to come there whom I didn't know, asking similar questions, needing the same help. And we launched what we called Founders Space Roundtables. We would get founders together around a table with venture capitalists, angel investors, lawyers, marketing people, and work out their problems. Well, this is going great. And then the founders came to me and said, why don't you open an incubator? Why don't you open a startup accelerator in San Francisco, which is where I was living? And I said, sure. And this was over a decade ago. So we launched Founder Space in San Francisco, and it just went like crazy because we were at just the right place at just the right time. And that was the beginning.
Wow, Steve, what a journey. And wow. First of all, you said you guys asked so many questions. I'm curious, what is the #1 most asked question in the startup space?
So the #1 most asked question, which shouldn't be the most asked question, honestly, is can you get me money? I need money. And every entrepreneur needs money. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur and you don't need money, well, then you're incredibly rich or you've already made it. So when they're coming to founder space, they're at that point where they are at the early stages of the company. They're getting everything ready to grow and they need more capital. But I'll tell you, money, if you're having trouble raising money, and a lot of entrepreneurs bang their head against a wall trying to get money, it usually has very little to do with not meeting the right people. Because if you have something that's going, money will come. People, it's sort of binary. Either a startup is always extremely difficult when things aren't quite working, when they're not quite there. They're almost there, but they're not really there. Once things click into place and they're just taking off, you can go to virtually any investor in Silicon Valley and they'll write you a check. There is so much money out there. So if you can prove to them that that you really have figured out something, then the money is there. However, at the a lot of entrepreneurs, they haven't completed their product yet. It's still in development, or they launched it and it didn't quite perform the way they thought it would. And they really need help. What I'll often do is step in with them and try to figure out what path they need to take to get their company in a position where it's ready to raise capital.
How do you describe that position that is ready to raise money?
So a startup that's ready to raise money has a few things in place. Number one, some investors, early stage investors, angel investors, they'll just take a bet on you. They'll give you money even though you haven't figured anything out. But you can't count on that. If you really want to be positioned to raise capital, especially from smart investors, you need three things. And if you don't have these things, it's going to be really hard. So number one, first thing I want entrepreneurs to do, I will tell you, is spend 80% of your time not building your product, not raising money, not even talking to customers. And you're like, what? What am I supposed to do? Well, what you're supposed to do at the very beginning is spend 80% of your time on your team. Like, who are the most amazing people you can work with? Not who's available, not who do you know right now. It's who do you actually need to execute on this? Because I know a lot of entrepreneurs with brilliant ideas and they go nowhere. Like they just never go anywhere because they don't have the right people in place to really build them out. So as the CEO of your startup, I'm going to tell you, your number one job is get the right people in place. If you do this, they will do everything else. And then their second question is, how can I get these people to join me when I have no money? Like, I just have an idea. And I will tell you, that is the challenge. That's what separates. Like, I'm an investor. I work with hundreds of investors. We want a CEO that can convince people to leave their great job at Microsoft or Google, come work for their startup for no money, like, because they believe in that person. Like, that's leadership. That means that company is going to go. If you can attract people on no money, wait till I give you money. Like, this thing is going to go on fire. But you have to prove to them. And how do you do it? How do you get somebody to quit an incredible job at Google or Facebook or any of these companies and come join your little startup? Well, I'll tell you, most people in the world, the most important thing to them is not their paycheck. The most important thing to them is what they do in their life. They want to do something meaningful. They want to create something. And there are plenty of people out there at those big companies who are frustrated. I talk to them every day. They're like, if the right startup just came to me, I would figure out, I would quit that great job and I would join that startup. But so how do you get a great person to join you? Somebody really high caliber. Well, the easiest time is at the beginning when you haven't invested a lot, because the more you invest in your company, like you've spent a year, you put in your life savings, and then you try to go out and find the good people and you don't have a lot of money. Well, you're only going to want to give them a little equity and your company's kind of already baked and set by the direction. They're probably not going to join. The best time to get them is when the idea is nascent, when it's just beginning, like you're just figuring out this little idea, and they can be part of figuring it out because that's what excites them. Like, if you don't have money, you got to make them own it with you. So bring them early, give them a good amount of equity because it's early, and then have you guys go on the journey together. It's not your company they're joining. It's your company together that you're creating. That's number one. Number two, everybody thinks, I need that idea. I need that perfect idea before I start my company. Like, oh, I can't start unless I have that epiphany. Well, I'll tell you, very few of us have those epiphanies out of thin air, right? Like, we just don't, like, those ideas just don't come to us, or they seem great when they're in our head, but we go out into reality and you find out, somebody's already doing it, or it doesn't quite work the way I thought it would, all these problems. So when you have this great team together, I often say you don't even need to sell them on an idea, because if you sell them on an idea, then they'll look at your idea and they go, I don't know. I don't know if that's the idea I want to do. But what you want to find people who share a similar vision with you. And by vision versus idea, I mean, a vision is we want to make a big change in the world. And we are going to figure out how to do this together. Like, how can we make this big change? So let's say you look at the fishing industry, which is awful. Like they're decimating our oceans, the fishing industry, with their pollution, with bycatch, with their practices, overfishing. All of these things are terrible. Like you say, I want to make that more sustainable. How do you do that? Right? Well, you could have a million ideas of how you could improve the fishing industry. But I will tell you, if the fishing industry doesn't buy into it, those ideas are worthless. Like they might actually work, but they have their own priorities, their own business. So if you're going to actually transform that industry, what you need to do is that industry will never transform from the inside. The insiders just keep doing what they're doing, even though they're destroying, themselves and our future for fishing. What you need to do is you need to take your team, this amazing team that shares that vision with you, not a specific idea. Go engage the fishing industry and then the people in that industry, and then really listen to them, really find out where their headaches are, really find out the problems you can solve. And in that process, figure out how you can make them into the type of business that I'm sure that the world needs, like more sustainable fishing that would benefit them and benefit their whole industry. But you cannot do that just by thinking of this idea. You have to go into the real world. And I call this process, this is the discovery process. This is the next thing you do in launching a startup. If you just have one idea, a lot of times you'll lock into that idea and you'll want to sell it to everybody, prove that it works. That's a mistake. If you say, look, I have 50 ideas and none of them may be right or entirely right, but I'm going to go into this industry and I'm going to try them out. We're going to experiment. I'm going to meet the people. I'm going to see how they react. I'm going to get their feedback. I'm going to find out what their problems are, what their headaches are, what their priorities are. And I'm going to find that intersection. That is where you create value. That is where you get something that really works. So that process is very different than how most startups start and why most startups fail. So that's why I wrote the book, Surviving a Startup, because I've just seen this hundreds of times working with entrepreneurs. The third thing you need to do when launching a business is what I call discovering extreme demand. So if you build a linear business, and a lot of people do, that grows slowly because there's a little demand, or a niche business that's sort of constrained because there's only a niche market, no venture capitalist is going to want to fund you. So what venture capitalists are looking for is exponential growth, like just shoots off the charts. How do you find that? Well, you find that by becoming a demand hunter. And that's where being flexible is great. Like I have all these ideas. I have this vision of how I'm going to change the industry. I'm going to go into it and I'm going to start talking to people and figuring out when I present them with something, that they're not like, oh, that's nice to have. That's great. Like if you go to 100 people and you show them and they go, oh, that's nice. That's good. You have nothing. Like you have absolutely nothing. Like a lot of entrepreneurs say, I went out to all these people and they said, it's great. Come back when you build it. And I'll tell you, they'll never buy it. Why won't they buy it? Because there's no extreme demand there. Here's what extreme demand looks like. You go to a potential customer and you're talking about what you do, and then their eyes go out. They go, oh my God, give that to me. Can I have that tomorrow? How can I get on board? What can I do? I really need that. You've got to give it to me. If you get that reaction from your customers, all of a sudden, if there are enough customers like it, so it's a big market, $1 billion market, boom, you build that, they will come. Like that, you build something else where they're like, oh, that's nice. They'll never bother. Like they just want you to go away is the bottom line. So you do those three things and you're in a really good position to start your company.
Wow, Captain Hoff. Of course, you're gonna wow us in the first 5 minutes. Wow, incredibly said. I love what you said about always number one, start with a vision. Make sure you get the right people on the bus. And then from that place, talking to your customer, fall in love with your customer, not your product itself. Discover what exactly they pinpoint, and then from there, find that this extreme demand, find a place, an area that he or she will say, yes, how can I pay you right now? And I love that 3 point you said, which is fantastic start for any entrepreneurs on their own journey. So thank you for such a gift. And Captain Hoff, I'm curious, you speak with such a passion and such an insight. How do you gain all that? Do you always know what you want to do in this planet?
You know when? I don't. And I'm always changing my mind. I'm just normal, like everybody else, human being, passionate human being, but I make a lot of mistakes along the way. I've done a lot of things. Like I like to say, I've had more careers than cats have had lives.
Really?
So more than 9. I've
Tell us
done
more.
I've been an electrical computer engineer. I've been a game designer. I've been a Hollywood television executive. I've
Mm.
been an animator. I've been a voice actor. I rewrote manga magazines. I'm a venture capitalist now. I've founded 3 different startups, being a startup CEO
Mhm.
and entrepreneur. The list goes on. So I,
So how did you
I,
know what is the right next step along the journey of
there is
exploration?
never a right next step. There are many possibilities at any juncture. Like you
Mm.
could do many things. And
Mhm.
most of us, if we're passionate, we could fall in love with many things. Like I could be working with wild animals and be totally passionate about, saving these
Mhm.
animals. I could be, an artist painting, and I'm sure I would be totally, at one point in my life I wanted to be an artist. My mom was an artist, so I thought I
Wow.
would be a painter. I wanted to be a filmmaker and I was totally passionate. But life is if you are open to possibilities, if you are open to ideas, there's always something amazing you can do on this planet. And and
Mhm.
I feel lucky enough to have tried many of them. Like to done, I've designed literally over a dozen games. And I've produced even more than that, like both on
Mhm.
mobile, PCs, video games, all different
Mhm.
types of games. And I've done all these different careers. And for me, every career can be really rewarding. If you're working with the right people, if you're working on a
Mhm.
project you're passionate about,
Mhm.
though that's what matters to me, not the
So
specifics.
with that, Captain Hoff, you obviously have, such a rich life. What made you to pivot from to another? What is your thought process along your journey and help you become who you are today?
Well, let me tell you. So I was in engineering, and I got into engineering because I loved games. As a kid, I made like tons of board games, like literally hundreds of board games. I programmed my own computer games, and I made movies, like a lot of different movies. So I was just
Wow.
very creative as a kid doing all this. And then computers come along, and my father, he was literally an MIT rocket scientist. Like he said, son, computers are going to change the world. Study computers. So I was like, Dad's smart, I should study computers. And I like programming games. So I went into it, but I found out, electrical computer engineering wasn't my thing. Like I like
Mhm.
the creative side of
Mhm.
making games. I didn't really want to sit there, you know, building electronic gadgets and stuff like that. That wasn't my interest. So
Mhm.
I graduated near the top of my class, had all these job offers, and I decided, no, I'm going to apply to film schools. I'm going to follow up on that dream. So I
Wow.
literally got into one of the top schools, USC, Film and Television, got my master's degree there, went out into Hollywood, and you get a degree in film, you think it's really important, but it doesn't get you into the industry. Like Hollywood is Hollywood. Like, you don't get into the industry because you have a degree in film. So I literally reached out and contacted 150 of the top executives in Hollywood. Like I found a way into all those doors, got a letter on their desk. That was like what I was determined to do. Like I was going to do this. Out of all those 150, only 3 responded. 3. And the first response that came to me
Mhm.
was from none other than the producer of Star Wars Empire Strikes Back.
Wow.
Yeah. He called me up and he was like, you know what? I loved your letter and I just want to talk to you. I don't have any job for you. And I was like, oh, no job. I just want to chat. So we chatted for like an
Mhm.
hour and
Mhm.
that was it. Like there was nothing. And the second opportunity I got was from none other than Disney. The head
Mm.
of Disney's film production calls me in for an interview. So I'm like, wow, I got it made. I'm getting into Disney. So I go there right out of school. I'm talking to her. Interview's going great. And then she asks me a trick question. She asked me, and you probably won't even believe she asked me this question. She asked me, what films do you like? And Me, I had just graduated film school with a master's degree. I had been watching all these phenomenal films from directors around the world, from Asia and Europe, and obscure art films and experimental films. And so, classic films. And I start rattling off all these names, of directors I just really admire. And then she looks at me and she said, "You didn't name any Disney movies." And
Ouch.
I was like, oh, I was like, I was just telling you the truth. Like, these are the directors I admire. They're geniuses. And she goes, "Do you watch Disney movies?" I go, "Oh yeah, when I was a kid, I loved them." Her face just dropped, and literally, she couldn't wait to get me out of her office. So she just got me out of the office. She didn't want a kid out of film school who wasn't into Disney films. So
Mhm.
I lost that job. I only had one shot left. And I get called in by this very famous Hollywood television and movie producer called Chuck Freeze. He had this big office on Hollywood Boulevard, right across from the Man Chinese Theater, with his name on the roof. And I get invited into his office, which is literally huge, with Emmys on the wall and all this stuff, and a big desk, just like you would see in the films.
Mhm.
And he's this big guy, and he looks like this character. If you've never seen the film Barton Fink by the Coen brothers, watch it. This is him. He is the producer. He looks just like that guy. And he's like, "Hoffman, so you want a job?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I want to write for you. I want to direct. Hire me." And he goes, "I don't know. We don't have that, but I'll see what I can do." So I get hired as a reader. And a reader is the lowliest job at one of these companies, where you're just like reading scripts, and what you're doing is filtering out all the bad scripts. So you read scripts, you write a synopsis, and then you recommend whether the producer in the company should read the script or not.
Mhm.
And so I started doing this, and I was doing it for a couple weeks, and I was like, okay, I could do this forever. But it's not, first of all, it's not very exciting. I'm not writing, I'm not directing. I am just reading scripts and filtering out the bad ones. And I looked around, and the other readers, many of them had been there for years doing this job.
Mm.
I was like, I don't want to stay here for years. So what I did was I went back to Chuck, and I was like, "Chuck, I can do more. I can do more. Give me a chance, give me a shot." And he was like, "Hoffman, I just hired you a couple weeks ago. What are you coming to me for, asking for more? Go away." So I went away. But he listened, and he gave me a chance to work with one of the producers in the company doing research on a project. Well, I did a really good job. The producer was really happy. And so what did I do a few weeks later? I went back to his office. I was like, contacted him, and I was like, "Chuck, give me a shot. Give me a chance." And he goes, "Hoffman, I just gave you the research job. Aren't you ever happy?" So I was doing the research job. I was still doing the reading job. I come into my office one day, and the head of the director of development, she's behind the desk. She usually just hands me my script, and I go away back home to read it. She looks at me, and her eyes are shooting daggers. She is so mad. And she's looking right at me like, why is she mad at me? And she stands up very rigid and says, "You got me fired," and storms out of the office. I'm like, what is she talking about? And then I get called into Chuck's office, and I go into Chuck, and I'm kind of shaken up because my boss, this weird thing just happened. And I
Mm.
sit down, and Chuck, and I go, "Chuck, what's going on?" And he looks at me and goes, "Hoffman, you're our new TV development executive." So literally, if you've seen the movie Swimming with Sharks, it's a great film about Hollywood. It's just like this. Like, it's like right out of the movie. So I was literally promoted to TV development executive, not in the best way. I didn't even want that job. I wanted to be a writer director, but I was
Oh.
in that job, and it was crazy. I was like, didn't know what to do. Like, I didn't know anything about Hollywood, her job. I was literally standing in her office. And what happened was I ended up figuring out the job on the job. So on the job, as I was working, I basically faked my way through it. Like, I didn't know anything about the job. The phone would ring. I'm sitting behind her desk. The phone would ring. And I didn't know if I should pick it up. I picked it up. And it's some Hollywood agent going, blah, 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 blah. We want to send you this. I was like, okay, send it to everybody who called. And the other readers would come in and they look at me and like, what are you doing behind Karen's desk? Why are you there? And I was like, well, I guess I'm the new I'm the new head of development. And when Chuck called me into his office, he would ask me questions that I knew did not know the answer to. So he would like have the script and they would have to cast a certain person in the role of this project. Like, and he'd go, Hoffman, what actress do we need in this part? Which actress do you recommend? And me, I had just been watching classic movies for the past 3 years, all these art films. I didn't know the Hollywood actors and actresses. I didn't even watch television at the time. And literally, he's asking me to fill this role. I didn't know what to say. So I said, Chuck, let me think about it. That's all I could say. And I went back to my office, and you know what I did? The first thing I did is I called my friend. He's my brother's best friend. He has a photographic memory, and he loves everything Hollywood. And literally, he knows every A-list actor, B-list actor, C-list actor, D-list actor, every actor in Hollywood. I called him up. I described the part. He would tell me, oh, this person would be perfect for the role. The next day, I go back into Chuck. He's like, Hoffman, have you thought about it? Have you thought about who we should cast? And I go, well, Chuck, I actually did. This person would be my first choice. This would be my second choice. And this would be my third choice. He looks at me. Hoffman, you're brilliant. So literally, I had the job. And to answer your question in a very long-winded way, I stayed at this job a year. And during that year, I was like, all I'm doing is kind of being the executive picking projects, but I'm not writing, I'm not directing. I want to create something. And one of the producers at that company, his cousin was the founder of this game company, Sega, which had just surpassed Nintendo to become the #1 video game company in the world at that time. And they were in Japan. And I thought, well, games are going to be bigger than, and I love games from my childhood, are going to be bigger than movies. And I met him and I said, send me to Japan. And he goes, okay, we want somebody from Hollywood in Japan. So he sent me off to their headquarters in Japan, started designing games. And so you asked me why all these choices I made, not really for the money, not really thinking about like long-term career, but like thinking about me as a person, what I wanted to do creatively, what I wanted to express. And then I would make that choice. And it was a chance, I was in a great position. Like Chuck, literally in that company, was really nice to me. And he was like, Hoffman, why are you leaving? I can't believe it. You got this great job. and he goes, how am I going to replace you? And you know what I did with Chuck? I said, Chuck, he was like, where am I going to find another Hoffman? I go, Chuck, you can find another Hoffman. My brother, he's just working at a record store in a low-paying job. He has no career at all. Do you want to hire him? And he goes, he's a Hoffman. We'll hire him. So he hired
Wow.
He liked me enough to hire my brother, like just because he was my brother. And then I was off to Japan.
Wow. First of all, like, it's literally a movie by itself, which I really needed to watch the swimming with the shark this weekend. And I want to comment a couple of things. Number one, like you are such an entrepreneur. Like in the beginning, with 150 ladders, you get one out of 150. And talking about perseverance, talking about grit, talking about not giving up, talking about never a door open for you, you just crack open a little moment of break. And
yeah, that's all you need. All you need is one out of 150. If you had, 140 out of 150, it would be harder because you'd have to choose which of these 140 job offers do I take? When you only have one, you just take it.
I love that. And I also wanted to mention that you are you're so bold. Like 2 weeks in the job, you ask for promotion, another 2 weeks, another, like almost like you are just so not afraid to ask, and you know what you want and you know what you deserve. And I think that is so incredible and inspiring. And then after a year or two, you want such a fancy job and fancy, title and all. but you decide one more time, follow your heart, follow your passion, follow your light to do something more creative. And that takes a lot of courage too. Sometimes not just saying yes to something, but saying no to another, also difficult too.
If you
So,
say
which is,
yes to something, you always have to say no to something else. That is life. So
true.
like these choices are hard. Like I was in that Japanese game company. I
Mm,
did a year for my first job and then I jumped to the Japanese game company. I was working there, incredible experience, really amazing. But after a
mm,
year, I felt like, games are huge. The potential's enormous. I want to start my own game company. Why am I working for
mm,
this big company? Like I could
mm.
do this on my own. So I literally quit in a year, moved back home to America and San Francisco, and with my what money I had saved up, launched my first company. And that's how I got into being an entrepreneur.
How does, okay, first of all, wow. Secondly, were you ever afraid? Were you ever scared? Was it just like you know what? I'm doing all this on my own. I have no idea how, but I'm gonna figure it out along the way. Like, how do you always just know what
Well,
is
I have these
next?
competing forces, because human beings are complex. So I have
Mm-hmm.
my side that's fearful and anxious, oh, I'm spending all my money. I'm leaving this great job. I'm like, what am I doing? Like this, I should just stick with it, and things will probably be great. And they would be great. That's
Mm-hmm.
one possible path. I was either of those, I would have probably done fine. Who knows what I would be now if I'd taken those other paths. And then on the other hand, um, I have that adventurous side, which says, don't worry about it. Like, just do it. Like, you want to do it, and you'll figure something will happen. So, I tend to usually the adventurous side ends up winning out, although it does cause me a lot of stress. So, like when I started my company,
Mm-hmm.
trying to get out my first game, now I had to go back to coding, which I hadn't done for a while. And I was never like a coding superstar because I didn't care about it that much. So
Mm-hmm.
I was coded the game myself. I was drawing the artwork. It was called Gazillionaire, was our first game, Gazillionaire. And literally, ironically, the game does what I do today. In the game, I thought, I want to make a game. I don't want to make a violent shooting game. I don't want to make a game that's, I want to make a game that contributes to society in a really good way. So
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make a game that was as fun to play, because I do like those shooting games, as all the shooting games, as fun to play as one of those. But
Mm-hmm.
it teaches you how to be an entrepreneur. And yeah, it teaches you how to
Interesting.
become a gazillionaire. So I wrote this game, like literally myself, funded it, had some artists and sound people working together. We created this really amazing world. And, we don't know what's going to happen with this game, but it's the early days of the internet. So we put it out there, and there wasn't like e-commerce. So people had to like send us cash in the mail to buy it. And the first sale comes from none other. You won't even believe this. The first sale comes from Lord Geck. Now, who is Lord Geck? He is some geek out there in the world who downloaded our game from a bulletin board at this server. And one of the only people sent me $15. I found out he's in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. I invited him over for dinner. We became friends, me and Lord Geck, and he was my first customer. But what happened was, the people at the largest PC game company in the world at the time, called Spectrum Holobyte Microprose, their testers, all their geeks, just like their Lord Gecks, were testing games. They downloaded it from the internet. They got hooked on it. They fell in
Wow.
love with that game. And this largest PC game publisher in the world contacts me like out of the blue and says, we want to put this in every store. We want to put this everywhere. I was like, okay. And then Gazillionaire just took off. And then my next two games just took off. And, ironically, this was like decades ago that I did Gazillionaire. It's still selling today. It's on Steam, the Steam, the game service. People love it. So it's like one of these classic games out. It's just doing your own thing, being creative is
Mm-hmm.
so rewarding. Like, it's not the money. It's like
Mm-hmm.
that you actually just go out there in the world and bring to life these
Mm-hmm.
things that you want to see there. To me,
I
that's what's
love
great about
that.
being an entrepreneur.
I love that, Steve. You are so passionate about your vision and you're such an innovator, such a leader to bring all the talents in together and create that vision. And of course, the rest is a history. And I'm curious, I don't want to say that entrepreneurship just like, movie. It's all rainbow and sunshine. I'm sure there's a raining day. I'm curious for you, your personal experience, what is hardest thing that you yourself have to do or overcome in that process?
Oh, there are so many hard things. So, I seem very confident now. I seem very capable. But even despite all this, I was a very shy guy. Like, people don't believe it today because I changed myself. Like, I literally became much less shy. But all the way through college, even that first job I talked to you about, when
Mhm.
the producer of Star Wars called me up, I probably could have asked him for pushed on him to get a job, but I didn't do this. And when I would go into Chuck, I told you the story about going into Chuck, the big TV producer, and asking for a promotion. It was heart wrenching. Like, it was like really, like, I had to really push myself to do it. It wasn't natural. I'm not one of these people who just like can go and say anything. Now I am, but I wasn't back then. So, but by doing what I found is by doing these things over and over that are challenging for you, that you
Mhm.
think you can't do, they
Mhm.
become easier and easier and easier. Like, it becomes much easier. So now I could go in like without any worry and ask for a promotion. In those days when I did it, it was actually really forcing myself to do it, like
Mm.
really pushing myself. And when I launched my first venture funded company, which
Mhm.
came after my gazillionaire days doing the gazillionaire product, um, it was called Spider Dance. Actually got together with friends from film school. It was tough. Like, I didn't know how to raise venture capital. They didn't have really any startup incubators or accelerators. It was the early days of the whole
Mhm.
ecosystem. I didn't know. I wasn't a salesperson. I was a creative person. So
Mhm.
literally, it was a huge challenge for us. Like, I and my partners banged our head against the wall for an entire year trying to raise money. And
Mhm.
so, so hard. And I have a long story about that. I don't know if there's time for it here, but uh, it was a really arduous journey, but it taught me so much.
What is the biggest lesson you learned in that process?
Well, I'll give you a few takeaways from this long story. Number one, uh, never believe what a venture capitalist says until they do it. So I had these venture capitalists who promised me money and then they would never deliver. Never stick with a venture capitalist. Never follow them. You have to set the terms. Like, if they aren't ready to give you the money, you just walk away. Like, this is
Mm.
a hard lesson. Like, a lot of entrepreneurs, they hold out hope. If I just keep that relationship open, they'll change their mind. I will tell you, if an investor doesn't give you the money within the first month, they're probably never going to invest. I mean,
Mm.
the chances are the amount you're going to gain from the amount of time you spend, you would be better off talking to somebody new. Like, you'll
Mm.
have your investment in time, and the chance of a payoff is much higher with going with somebody new than going back to somebody who had the chance to invest and did not do it. And you need to make sure that they, as somebody raising capital, you need to set the deadline. You need to say, like, I've met with you 3 times. Like, either you're going to invest now or we're going to go our separate ways. You need to say that. Like, a lot of times people will not invest unless they're afraid of losing the deal. So if you're just hanging out
Interesting.
there, like, with them, like, always available, they're going to wait. They feel like most investors, when they look at a deal, and I could tell you, being an investor now, I know
Mhm.
what it's like. It's very easy if the deal is bad to say no, right? Oh, I don't want it, right? It's very easy if the deal is like hot, like it's like everybody's going after this deal and you just want to get in on it, like,
Mhm.
so that you don't get left out, right? Most deals are in the middle. They're
Mhm.
in a gray area. Like, they're good. They have some problems. You don't quite know. Will this be a big thing? Will it not work? That's where almost all these deals are. So when you're dealing with investors like that, you need to push them. And one of my great mentors told me this: push them for a no. Get them to
Mm.
say no. Like, everybody wants them to say yes. Well, you can't get somebody to say yes. You can't make them. You can only show them everything you have, answer all their questions, give them all the information. And then as soon as you do that, you have to say, are you going to invest or not? And be ready to take the no. Like, and if they say no, If they say, I don't know, then you say, well, then you're not investing. I'll go raise from other people. Like if they don't know, it's a no. That is one of the biggest lessons I learned.
Have you ever take those no's personal?
Yeah, in the early days, I was very thin-skinned. Like I would be like everything was personal. But you do this enough, like I said with everything, like whether it's
Mm,
getting on stage and talking and doing all that, you do this enough and you start to realize it's not about you. It
mhm.
is not about you. I mean, it's always somewhat about you because you're always selling yourself in the process. So you kind of
Right.
lie to yourself if you say it's not entirely about you, you know,
Mhm,
because
mhm,
people judge you if you're the CEO. They're looking
mhm,
at you. But um, you have to say, I won't let it be about me. Like you know, if they're going to make a decision, if it's not a right fit, it's not a right fit. I'm moving on. I'm not going to dwell on it. I'm not going to,
mhm,
beat myself up. I'm not going to doubt myself. I'm
mhm,
just going to move to the next person, the next thing, because that's a much healthier way to deal with rejection.
mhm. Beautiful. I'm curious, Captain Hoff, you wear so many hats. I wonder what is one biggest superpower of yours?
Biggest superpower. Well, one of them is my sheer passion for whatever I do, whoever I
Hmm.
engage with. As you can probably tell, like you, Wen, we're both passionate people. That's why we hit it off.
Yep.
Um, and number two, I can take very complex ideas and simplify them and explain them in a very clear, simple way, fun way, which, like my
Mm,
book, Surviving a Startup, like if you like how I talk now, you'll like the book because literally it's packed with these practical things in very clear language and very fun way. So those are my kind of two superpowers.
amazing. And Captain Hoff, you said earlier you have such a rich life. You made so many different choices, different paths. I'm curious, looking back, would you change anything?
You know, there are things I would change. I made mistakes. Like we all make mistakes. Like,
Hmm.
you know, in one of my early startups, when we were just starting out, literally the guys from YouTube wanted to bring our company into theirs. We were doing mobile social network, and they were doing and video, and they were doing video, and it was the very early days. Gosh, we should have said yes. Like, like that would have been a great quick exit, like happened overnight. But financially, that would have been an amazing decision. We said no. Like we said, we're doing our own thing. We do, you do your thing, we'll do ours, so it didn't work out. But so there are a million little things like that. One of my companies I could have sold for a huge amount of money, but I passed. The venture capitalist said, no, don't do it, and we passed it up. It would have been a good exit. So there are all these different opportunities you have. You just can't dwell on those.
Mm. I love that. I love that you have such
I
a clarity.
could have bought Bitcoin at $3. Okay? We all regret something.
I love that, certainly. And I think it's so difficult looking back to looking at all the points, all the dots, see all them connecting, but in the same time thinking, oh damn, I wish I could done something differently. And I'm curious, um, Captain Hoff, today you've done so much in every single point of your life journey. Today, what drives you?
So
What do you
today,
care about?
well, a lot of things drive me. So I want to work on projects I'm passionate about, which has always been my core drive. I want to work on creative projects. I like those. I love helping out entrepreneurs. It's like the connecting with them as people, but also their businesses are like puzzles. So solving their problems, like figuring out what is the thing that they could do that will really make the biggest difference in their business. And a lot of times
Mhm,
they're so close to it, like I was in my businesses, that it's hard to see. Like you just don't see that path clearly. But
mhm.
somebody from the outside, you can see what they're doing wrong, and you can really help them. So those are kind of the three things that drive me.
Mm, I love that. What is number one mistake that you see entrepreneur made?
Entrepreneurs make so many mistakes, but one of the biggest ones is sticking with the same thing too long. Like none of us want to fail. None of us want to give up. None of us want
Mhm,
to say, "Oh, we invested a year and $100,000 and this thing isn't working." That's really hard to do. Um,
mhm,
so, but by sticking with something that has already proven that it is not working, you are just wasting more time and more money. Great entrepreneurs try a lot of things, a lot of different things really quickly, and they only
Mm,
stick with it if it's going. Like,
interesting.
you can abandon something too early if you take this approach, but the risk of abandoning something too early versus the risk of sticking with it too long is less, actually. Like, so what you need to do is you just when you stop something, you just need, basically, at the earliest possible point, get to that person who's going to be the customer for whatever you're doing, and really look into their eyes and see if you have something. And if their eyes aren't on fire, like I told you, like going crazy, move
Mhm.
on. Like, no matter what you invested in there, move on.
Wow, that's a beautiful insight. And the reason I say that is there's such a challenging balance between being perseverant, right? Really stick it out versus, hey, when it's time to really pack and leave and have all the sum cost. And I love what you said about using the benchmark is seeing your customer, whether he or she had a twinkle in the eyes, you can tell whether truly this is something that had the fire, had the potential.
Yes, if that customer is, they're just like at it, then you have something. And even if it's going to be a long road ahead, stick with it.
Mm,
If they're not like that, chances are you'll never make them like that. You can't change people,
fair
what they
point.
want, what they need. You have to discover that.
I love that. And I'm curious today, Steve, you have done so many different type of things. I'm curious today, what's your definition of success? And with that, do you think you are successful?
I think being successful is very simple, and you can do it from day one. You could be successful right now, all of you. And that is being proud and of all the decisions you make, the little decisions to the big decisions. Like, if you say, that's the right decision to make, not right just for money, not right just for getting myself ahead, but really the right thing to do for society, for people. I know in my heart it's right. You're successful.
I love that. So are you saying that even looking back, you said, oh, I could have sold this deal to XYZ, like even those quote unquote could be a right choice. By the time it's aligned with you, you're still proud of making that decision? Is that what you said?
I say we're all going to make mistakes, right? So
Hmm.
we're all going to make errors. Those don't matter. But when you are faced with how you treat other people, whether you are
Mm,
going to be sneaky and steal from people or lie, or whether you can, with integrity, make decisions that you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, these I can't control all these things in the world, whether my product's successful, whether, I get, I become, famous, whether this or that happens, whether I become rich. You can't control those, but you can control the decisions you make. And if you can be proud of those every step
mm.
along the way, you are being successful.
I love that. So, do you think you are successful today?
I do. And I'm happy with the choices I made.
That's beautiful. And I'm curious, looking back, Captain Hoff, what would you tell your younger version of self, like 30 years old? What would you wish him knows in an earlier time?
The younger version of myself, I would tell, uh, don't worry so much. Like, don't and don't think that any decision you're making now matters as much as you think it does. So we all put ourselves under a lot of pressure. Like, we
Mhm.
have to make this decision. Oh my God, it's going to be the end of the world if we don't make the right decision. And I'll tell you, you'll look back a year. Yes, and we all do that when. And a year later, you will look back. If you look back at your life, like look at your life last year, all those things you stressed about, don't even remember 90% of them. And even of the 10% that you can sort of recall, they don't
Mhm.
really matter to you. Like, all those worries you had and all that stress they don't
Mhm.
matter. None of it matters. So if it doesn't matter a year later, well, what about 10 years later? It's going to matter even less. Like, you're going to be,
Mm.
and in your lifetime, all those little things don't matter. What matters are the big things. So when you're under that stress, say, well, I won't even care about this a year from now. Probably I won't even
Mm.
remember it 3 months from now, what's going on today. Why am I worried about it now?
I love that. So, with that, Captain Hoff, what matters to you today and what you are creating in the future?
So today I am running Founder Space. And so running this incubator, it's been a wonderful experience. I'm also working on my own personal creative projects, my writing. I launched 2 books this year, Surviving a Startup and The 5 Forces. And I want to continue doing that in the future. So I'll be coming out with another book. I haven't started yet, so don't ask me about it. And I'll also be growing Founder Space and looking to work with a lot of amazing people.
Wow, so beautiful. If you can imagine one day when we all go to heaven, on your capstone, what do you want people to say about you? What is the
Ah,
one line you want people to say and remember you by?
so I want people to remember me I want them to say, Captain Hoff was a passionate guy. That's what I want.
Hey, he indeed is. I can personally back on that. This is just so lovely, Captain Hoff. I love that you share such a heartfelt journey, and just I felt like the whole conversation as I am in the movie with you in every
Oh.
chapter of your life, which is just so vivid, so thrilling,
Well, I have
so
a philosophy.
yes, sir.
We can all live boring lives, or we can write the story of our life to make it exciting. So
I
you
love
are
that.
writing every day, you're writing the story of your own life. Why do you want a boring life? Like the stories you love are where the hero goes through challenges, adventures,
Mhm,
they're
mhm.
near death, they're struggling, everything's going wrong, but somehow they come out of it. That's so when my life gets routine, I shake it up. And because I
Mm.
want a more exciting story. And I encourage everybody to do that.
I really love that. The way how I say use my word is rather than stand in the sideline watching the movie pass by, why not being the actress, being the actor of your own movie, create the entire story, the entire narrative, the way how you want it to be. So I
Yes.
love your analogy, which is so beautiful. So last but not the least, Captain Hoff, anything else you want to share with our entrepreneurs, our leaders who are just so memorized by you and your charisma?
Well, thank you, Wen. You're so kind. If the entrepreneurs want to reach me, I am super easy to find. All they have to do is go to founderspace.com, Founderspace, and on Founderspace, I have tons of stuff. So there's podcasts, there's videos, there's all this online startup kit, online startup program, all this stuff. So and you can contact me right there on Founderspace. Also, I am on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn and contact me there. And I love to engage with entrepreneurs.
All right, everybody, this is the Captain Hoff. You can find him at all those places he just mentioned. And once again, Steve and Captain Hoff, I am so honored, so grateful to have you today with us. Your beautiful insight and most importantly, your passionate heart is so affectionate. So thank you so much for you being you. I truly feel like you are making this world a better place every single day. And that's why honor is truly all mine. And thank you, everybody, for watching today. I so appreciate you being here. I also hope that you enjoy the show as much as I do. And I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.
Okay, we did it, Wen.
What